Appleton. My rank is number 2. My serial number is 1234.
Not supposed to tell. Hi, I'm Kathleen Plant with Business West and Healthcare News.
Hi, I'm Steve Corrigan with Mountain View Landscape.
Charlie Epstein with Epstein Financial and the 401k Coach.
Hi, Howard Cheney with Myers Brothers Coica right here in Holyoke.
Hello, I'm Alana Sambor and I'm with Axia Insurance Services.
Okay, so just to say, this was a group effort, and I followed everybody's direction, and so one of them suggested that I put up this chart to just gaze at this a minute to just see that there are 8 steps. They're going to be talking about them. You're going to be learning all of this. But so we start with, hit it.
So Aaron and I met, we decided that we were going to kick off the presentation by doing the first 2 chapters of the book together. And we met at a coffee shop to brainstorm exactly how we were going to do that, what we were going to do. And our coffee shop conversation was so engaging and wonderful that we just decided to recreate it for you here tonight. So we're going to kind of freewheel this a little bit, like the random guy who gave us unsolicited advice as we left. If anybody wants to interrupt with advice or comments or stories, feel free. But anyway, I think it's important before we begin to just give a little bit of preface to what these books are about. So Leading Change, like we said, it's the short one, but it read like a much longer book. It's very good. It's about if you're bringing your organization through a really massive headset shift, a massive behavior shift. So a merger, an acquisition, a leadership change, a market change. It's really about leading change in a big headset way, not just like getting a CRM system or changing accounting softwares or something. Do you want to do Smarter, Faster, Better?
This book is so chock full of tips, things that we can do to be more productive, both in real life and in our businesses. And it was really interesting in that I didn't want to put it down, so much so that I bought the Audible version too so that I could listen to it and just absorb it that much faster. And just really engaging with the stories that Charles Duhigg tells that make you think, oh, this is how this actually applies in real life. So I find there's nothing worse than going to a session or a speaker or a conference or something, you get all excited about it, and then you get home and you're, now what do I do? Where do I start? So that was what was really good about this book. Yeah. Immediately applicable.
Yeah, so we found like Leading Change was great for that sort of like inspiration, like big picture thinking. The frameworks made a lot of sense. But when you started to get down into like what does that actually look like in action, we found that harvesting some examples in Smarter, Faster, Better might make it kind of more come alive. So.
Absolutely. So thanks for meeting me here for coffee so early. And I gotta say, I'm a little nervous about how we make this not boring, because I'm glad Ira said this book was a slog, not just us.
I know, it was a little rough.
But it was pretty interesting to read about how when you're thinking about a change in an organization, that you have to get excited and worked up about it in a we've got to change this kind of way. And the author really talked about how most leaders don't do that.
Yeah, that the creating a sense of urgency is really critical to actually getting people off the dime and making something happen, and making sure that you don't just feel that urgency, but that it's like really down to every aspect of your team. Didn't your dad have some kind of saying about that?
Oh, right. So from an early age, I can remember my pappy saying, nothing happens until there's a catastrophe. And he's kind of right about that in terms of, well, yeah, life is pretty good right now. Why would we want to make a change? The devil you know versus the devil you don't. So what are some of the things you see in your organization or out there that might make it hard to make a change?
I think for us it comes down to like what we know is a lot easier than what. No idea what that is.
The author of my Audible book, but I don't think that's mine.
Come on.
Own that, right.
It's very much like a coffee shop.
There you go. So that was some random guy.
I think in our organization, it is habit, makes us really resistant to change, that it's a lot easier to just, even if you do something really manually, it's easier to just keep doing it manually than to learn the new software system. Like we went through that when we went from like manual, like physical job jackets. I have an advertising agency, so like a lot of like individual projects to an actual like online project management software. And the new people were like, yeah, cool, this is so much easier. And the people who had done it this way for a long time were like, no, it's not easier, until we got used to it. Like you have to get into the rhythm of it, and now, yeah, it's easier.
That's true. It's so much harder to learn to do something a new way than it is to learn it in the first place.
Yeah.
I think we really take that for granted. The other thing, like maybe we can put up this chart here. The one that struck me was too many visible resources.
Yeah, so I think this is like a really good example of why John Cotter is horrible. So too many visible resources, like what does that even mean? Like it's a great example of something that like until he actually said that what he means is like if your office is like really well appointed, like we've got a Keurig, I'm always buying like stuff for the fridge, I'm buying lunch for everybody, and it makes it feel like we have plenty of money, everybody's fine. So it kind of like undermines that sense of urgency if people are feeling like, oh, this is comfortable, I've got it good, there's not that sense to change behavior. Too many visible resources like doesn't really say that to me, but like
It's so
too many
true.
amenities and yeah, making people too comfortable.
Or where you don't have to worry about that. And one of my customers said that to me. We were debating, genetic engineering, and is that useful or is that not? And she said the only people who are worried about that are the ones with a lot of room between their backbone and their belly button.
Yeah.
If you worry about where your next meal is coming from, you're not picky about what that is in the way that those of us who have so many choices really are. So I think that's spot on.
Yeah, so there's obviously like a good argument to genetically engineer to create something new if you're really worried about your crops failing due to disease and you can't find your next meals.
Right, or you don't want to use pesticides or whatnot. And then I started thinking about the different ways that we've put all these productivity hacks into life. I mean, like, could you dial a phone number if you didn't have it in your phone?
No, I know like 3 phone numbers now.
Probably from the days when you had to dial.
Yeah, I know
right?
my home phone number from when I was in like 1st grade, but my cell phone number I always have to stop and think.
And it's so true. I mean, I was reading this article about Barack Obama and talked about how he always wore the same outfit, blue suit, gray suit, one of the two, with a white shirt and a blue or red tie, so that he never had to think about what he was going to wear in the morning, because the leader of the free world needs to put his brain power to work at much more important decisions.
Yeah, I will admit that I assume that my time is pretty much as valuable as the President of the United States. So I also did that for a time when we were going, we did a big like rebrand, like a big sort of company mindset, market position shift. And from like October through about a month ago, I bought a ton of the same black dress and wore it for every single day. Just so I looked like I was like ready to go in the morning and looked like I meant business to my team and to our clients, but I didn't actually have to spend time picking out something new to wear each time. So.
And if you were a guy and it was a black suit, nobody would even think about that.
I
right?
know,
So,
but I got
perfect.
questions.
Did you stay here? Although I have to say, when I had to replace my car, I did get the same one again, so I didn't have to think about what side the gas tank was on. And then I mentioned that to a colleague. She's like, I would have laughed at you, but I got a new car last week, and I'm really regretting that it's on the other side. I've had to back out 3 times in a week.
So much wasted time.
No kidding, and gas, I think, too, from that one. So, yeah, lots of resources and all these things that we're trying to do to make ourselves more productive. Does it actually work against us? I mean, that's easy to become complacent. I don't have to worry about it because it's in my phone. I don't have to think about it because somebody else has that under control. And I think that's everywhere. And we kind of take it for granted.
Yeah, and I think in the Smarter, Faster, Better, there were like a bunch of examples of how mental models actually stopped people from making change or identifying problems, and any that popped out for you that like.
Right, or how they put it to work. So there was a great story about a nurse in a NICU. Her name was Darlene, and talked about how with all this data coming at her in the NICU, she saw some things differently than other nurses did. So all the machines hooked up to the child showed that her vitals were within normal ranges. This little baby girl that another RN was keeping watch over and seeing the same thing, but unconcerned. Her skin was slightly mottled instead of uniformly pink. Her belly seemed a bit distended. They'd recently drawn blood from a pinprick in her heel, and the bandage showed a blot of crimson rather than a small dot. And none of that on its own was particularly troubling because none of the monitors were going off. But Darlene said, this baby doesn't look right. She put all these pieces together and went and hunted down a doctor, creating that sense of urgency. We got to do something right now. It turned out the baby was in the early stages of sepsis, which, if untreated, can kill within a day. So she saved that baby's life by not just relying on all of the indicators that had been put in place one at a time for her to do her job and become more efficient at it, but by putting that together as a big picture and looking at what is a healthy baby supposed to look like, didn't match up.
Yeah, and I think that was what was really interesting is that like Charles doing like really interviews all these people and gets at like why exactly, like what made you see what that other person didn't. And her response was, in my head, I keep a picture in my mind of what a healthy baby looks like. And I was, you know, just every baby I look at, I kind of like hold it up against this like image of perfection in my mind. And it allows her to have like these gut reactions that she can trust, which I thought was pretty cool and made me think about like, oh, what could I do with that in my business? Like I feel like, again, like sometimes we have projects that feel like they're going okay, and then all of a sudden like things start to spiral out of control, and then you have like a disaster on your hands. And like, what could I have seen earlier? Maybe if I had in my head a picture of like a project running perfectly, or I could get my project manager to do that, then we'd spot those issues earlier before everything becomes a disaster.
And maybe we do like the House of Cards things where we say pause and then go talk to the audience.
Yeah. All right.
So you really want to read this book, especially this chapter on focus about the airplane pilots, and one that crashed into the ocean and one that survived the worst air disaster ever because he had a mental model telling him how to react in that kind of situation.
Yeah.
Back on.
All right.
All right, what are we going to do for chapter 2?
So chapter 2 was a lot about creating the guiding coalition, as John Cotter so eloquently puts it. And that's really about trying to like get your key leadership team formed and get them ready to support you in the change, because nobody can create major change in an organization by themselves. And I thought that was like an interesting point, but again, like kind of begs the question of how. And Cotter really like, you know, brings up the idea of like you need a really like gelled, functioning, like high functioning team. And I thought like one of the things that like hit me hard in the Smarter, Faster, Better book was when he starts to talk about psychological safety. And my millennials throw this term out at me, like I don't feel psychologically safe at work. And I'm always like, I don't know what that means. Like I don't.
Besides this book.
Right, I guess it's something that people are hearing and they don't feel psychologically safe, so they don't feel like they can take risks, or they want to know like exactly what is going to happen to me if I fail. And so again, like I heard them talking about it, but literally I have no idea how to make them feel any safer, because I'm like, I never fire anybody, and you know, I feel like I treat you all pretty well.
So it's the ability or to have a place where you can try something, and if it doesn't work out, that's okay. Try again, correct it.
Yeah, like we talk at 6 Point about redefining failure. In Smarter, Faster, Better, he also uses the example of Saturday Night Live and like what the early days in Saturday Night Live were like. And I don't know if Ira's gonna have the video, but
Yep, in 1 second.
I remember. It's like I can hear it in my mind.
It was crazy in those days, right? I mean, like all the reports sort of say that.
Yeah. So
About 5 years ago,
if you can
Google
fast
started.
forward to, let's say, 3 minutes and 45 seconds.
You've done this before.
Yeah.
And psychological safety
same
is the
keyword.
single greatest determinant in whether a team comes together or whether it falls apart. One of my favorite examples of psychological safety and a team really coming together is the early days of Saturday Night Live. So when you think about it, Saturday Night Live never should have worked, right? You have a bunch of comedians who are kind of misanthropes to begin with, and they're all kind of egomaniacs. And yet, for some reason, when Lorne Michaels put them in a room together, everyone was willing to kind of get along. They were willing to put aside their ego and create this amazing show together. Not only an amazing show, but a show that was put together under these incredible time pressures, right? They have a week to put together a live show. And when I talked to the early writers and performers on Saturday Night Live, and I asked them why this happened, all of them said the same thing: because of Lorne Michaels. So Lorne Michaels has this very unique way of running meetings. He sits down, and the meeting starts, and what he'll do is he'll make everyone go around the table and say something. And if someone hasn't spoken up in a little while, Lorne Michaels will actually stop the meeting and he'll say, Susie, I noticed that you haven't chimed in. Like, what are you thinking about right now? And if somebody looks upset, if an actor looks like he's having a bad day, or a writer sort of seems like they're pissed off, Lorne Michaels will again stop the meeting and he'll actually take that person out of the room and he'll say, look, it looks like something's going on that's bugging you. Like, let's talk about it. What's happening in your life? Now, what's crazy about this is that this actually makes meetings kind of go on forever. And Lorne Michaels is like known for being productive, right? He's known for this person who creates these amazing shows and is doing like 12 things at any given time. But the way he runs meetings is that he makes sure everyone in the room has something to say. And if you look like you're thinking something and not verbalizing it, he makes you verbalize it, or he takes you aside and he says, what's going on with you? Like, why are you upset, or are you happy? What Lorne Michaels does is he creates psychological safety. He's like a master of creating psychological safety.
Okay, you can
And as a result,
so sort of like I consider myself Barack Obama, I also like to think of myself as Lorne Michaels. And I run a team of creatives, so we've got the egomaniacs, we've got the introverts and the misanthropes. And so the idea of, like, if all I have to do is encourage them to speak in meetings, that's just a great, like, super simple tool to create this really vague thing that they call psychological safety. So I thought it was something really concrete that I started using immediately, and there's tons of, like, little tips and tricks like that that he picks up that are really great and kind of all go into that chapter of that really kind of help show you how to create that guiding coalition and create that team that can bring forward change.
Awesome. And just one more thing that I picked up from our conversation that I think the group would be real interested in hearing. You talked about clarity of your vision, just like these guys are really clear on what they want to do with this television show. And you said you put a lot of time and effort into being specific about second stage companies and defining that for your staff. And then what happened to that team once you had that clarity? You said it didn't quite shape up the way you thought it was going to into your guiding coalition.
Yeah, so it was, I feel like, actually I'm not really sure even what you're getting at.
Well, you had told me that like some people jumped on board and they got really, really excited, but then other ones said, yeah, this isn't really for me.
Yeah. Yeah, like what really happened was it kind of like helped to shake out our team, so the people who were really gonna help me push forward a lasting change were totally on board, and some people like specifically opted out, not just out of the vision but out of the company, which really helped me hone into like my next generation team, and also gave me room to hire for people for the future. So it actually ended up working out really well.
And I think that's a fantastic lesson, because we don't want to get rid of good people, but if they're not on board and pulling in the same direction, they really are slowing you down.
Yes,
So.
as my women's president's group says, love them out the door.
There you go. And oh, by the way, that advice from the random old guy was something along the lines of, just remember, engineers built the Titanic, amateurs built the Ark.
Which one sank? That was the... All right, so we'll pass it on to the next group.
So step 3 in the book Leading Change is about developing a vision and a strategy. And one of the things that really came through in this book is the fact that these 8 steps are very specific and they need to be done in order from step 1 through step 8. You can't do them out of order. You can't skip one. You can't decide to start in the middle and then go back to the beginning and think that it's all going to turn out successfully. And you'll probably hear some of my counterparts here talk to this as well. So developing a vision and a strategy, my first takeaway was that, why is that the third step? Shouldn't that be the first step? Don't you need to know what it is you want to do before you can do any of the rest of these things? And through reading the book, I really understood why, first, you have to have that sense of urgency. You need to have that urgency why you need to make a change. If you don't have that urgency to make a change, what's the point of having a vision? And you need that guiding coalition. You need that team of people who's going to help you flesh out what that vision is. So that's what this part's about, is about creating that vision. And I'm going to read you a couple little stories. So you ready for story time? So imagine the following. 3 groups of 10 individuals are in a park at lunchtime with a rainstorm threatening. In the first group, someone says, "Get up and follow me." When he starts walking, only a few others join in. He yells at those still seated, "Up, I said, and now!" In the second group, someone says, "We're going to have to move. Here's the plan. Each of us stands up and marches in the direction of the apple tree. Please stay at least 2 feet away from the other group members and do not run. Do not leave any personal belongings on the ground here, and be sure to stop at the base of the tree." In the third group, someone tells the others, "It's going to rain in a few minutes. Why don't we go over there and sit under that huge apple tree? We'll stay dry, and we can have fresh apples for lunch." 3 different versions of leadership here. Same vision, they're all going to get to the apple tree, but 3 different ways to accomplish that. The first way is using authoritarian decree. In other words, I'm going to tell you what you are going to do. I am your leader, you shall follow. I'm sure we've all had people we've met in our lives who are like that. Maybe you've worked for some of those people. It's not very fun. I have worked for one of those people. It's definitely not fun. And it wasn't when I worked in a family business. Version number 2 was micromanaging. I'm going to tell you how you need to walk to the tree. You need to stay 2 feet apart. I'm going to plan every step for you and tell you what to do so you don't need to think and you're just little minions following along. The third step was the vision. We're all going to go to the tree. We're going to get to enjoy apples. We're going to stay dry. There was the vision there. He didn't tell them, or she didn't tell them how to get to the tree. Just expressed, that's where we're going. Let's get there. Those are the differences. Lots of companies come up with visions and try to enact it in one of those 3 ways. Chances are the third way will be the most successful. You'll have the buy-in from the team. Everyone's on board, heading in one sole direction. That's chances are the way you're going to get to lasting change. You may get to change through the other 2 methods. It may not be lasting. So this chapter talks a lot about what a good vision is, and I'm just going to, instead of giving you examples, I'm just going to give you this one little blurb on an explanation of what a good vision is. If you cannot describe your vision to someone in 5 minutes and get their interest, you have more work to do. So it's very simple. Your vision of where you want to go. You need to be able to describe it in 5 minutes and get their interest. It doesn't mean you have to share the steps of how you're getting there. So there was a section in Smarter, Faster, Better, which was the storytelling book, which was the one we all enjoyed reading a little more. Not to say that leading change was bad, but leading change was really the lasting one that's left all these wonderful ideas and thoughts mulling around in our heads. In this, I'm going to read you a story about somebody who created a vision and how it all played out. In the 1950s, during the lingering wake of the devastation of the Second World War, Japan was intensely focused on growing the nation's economy. A large portion of the country's population lived in or between the cities of Tokyo and Osaka, which were separated by 320 miles of train track. Every day, tens of thousands of people traveled between the cities. Vast amounts of raw industrial material were transported on those rail lines. But the Japanese topography was so mountainous and the railway system so outdated that the trip could take as long as 20 hours. So in 1955, just think about that for a second while I read the rest, the head of the Japanese railway system issued a challenge to the nation's finest engineers: invent a faster train. 6 months later, a team unveiled a prototype locomotive capable of going 65 miles per hour. A speed, at that time, made it among the fastest passenger trains in the world. Not good enough, the head of the railway system said. He wanted 120 miles per hour. Again, 1955. The engineers explained that was not realistic. At those speeds, if a train turned too sharply, the centrifugal force would derail the cars. 70 miles an hour was more realistic, perhaps 75. Any faster and the trains would crash. The railway head asked, why do the trains need to turn? There were numerous mountains between the cities, the engineers replied. Why not make tunnels then? The labor required to build tunnels through that much territory would equal the cost of rebuilding Tokyo after World War II. 3 months later, the engineers unveiled an engine capable of going 75 miles per hour. The railway chief lambasted the designs. 75 miles per hour, he said, had no chance of transforming the nation. Incremental improvements would only yield incremental economic growth. The only way to overhaul the nation's transportation system was to rebuild every aspect of how the trains functioned. Over the next 2 years, the engineers experimented. There were hundreds of innovations, large and small, that each made the trains a little bit faster than before. In 1964, the world's first bullet train left Tokyo along a continuously welded rail that passed through tunnels cut into Japan's mountains. It completed its inaugural trip in 3 hours and 58 minutes at an average speed of 120 miles per hour. This railroad head had a vision. We're going to change the economy by making a faster train. He didn't have all of the details. He didn't know how it was going to be done, but he challenged his team to stretch and figure out how to make it happen. That's what a vision's all about. Obviously, he got those people excited about it because they followed through. And they made a train that everybody thought was impossible to go 120 miles an hour and made it happen. And that's it. That's mine.
All right, so Tiffany told us about step 3, creating that vision with clarity. I'm talking step 4, which is communicating your vision for change and getting the buy-in to do it. So one of the things we all know is incredibly difficult is change. There are a lot of people in this world who can't, won't, don't embrace change. But even more difficult than that is communicating about change. It's really challenging, and if you are not following the steps in leading change that Cotter outlines, then you're probably not going to get everybody to buy in. You're probably going to have breakdowns along the way. So this chart talks a little bit about some of the key points that he makes in the book. So one of the first things, actually, before we even get there, is the story. So we all have heard Martin Luther King Jr.'s version of I Have a Dream. That story that he told it takes all of us to a different place. It's so clear, it's so meaningful, not just for someone at the top of the chain of the civil rights movement, but all the way down through an organization. So he really told the story that compelled people to listen. And once he told that story, he told it again and again and again, and then everyone throughout the organization followed suit. So a good story, and a story we all have to tell ourselves when we're trying to lead change and provide that vision, that clear vision, is something that's exciting and compelling. It's also, it employs people to take action. It doesn't keep the frontline employee at a different place than the middle manager or the senior level. Everybody's pulling in the same direction. So if you look at the chart, the sample, keep it simple. So I went to work for American Airlines many, many years ago. It was my first professional job. And one of the very first things I heard from my bosses was no jargon. We may have a language that we use with each other. We don't use that language with clients and customers. And I think a lot of people forget about that. You talk in terms of what you're familiar with, but if it's technobabble or whatever it might be, your business is your business, but your clients and customers and patients and whomever else don't know that as well. So you have to be careful with that. Simple, direct, focused. So being very clear about what that message is really the key thing. So then there's the picture, painting the picture and making it vivid. There's a step that I have here I want to share with you because this seemed to make really sense to me. So keeping in your mind that your clarity, you have to make this vision really clear, using the term visual. So the word visual. So visual stands for, the V is for vivid, as in, the MLK speech. I is inspiration. You want to lift people's spirits. You want to get everybody to understand why this change is going to make their lives so much better, their work lives. If this is your, if you're doing this for work, you're going to inspire all different levels. So if you have a story that you're concocting for this change, you don't want people to talk only to each other about this. You want the communication to go up and down and up. Down and up and up and down. So you want to make sure you're not one-way communicating, because that never works, as we all know. So S is specific. The who, what, where, when, and how. If you can define that for your vision, then you'll have a simple explanation, because you know those things that you need. And the people following you and committing to this vision will also have a simple way. Then understandable for you. Again, simple everyday language. You don't want to be complex. You don't want to use words that might confuse people. And then A is achievable. Be honest. Communicate. You want to make sure that you're not overachieving or overcommitting people who aren't even there yet. You've got this great vision, but your folks are in different places within your organization, and they have different responsibilities with this vision. So you want to make sure that those steps are achievable for each of the levels of your organization, to everybody you need to get bought in. And then obviously your vision, and as you communicate it, you want this to have a long-term benefit. You want to be able to communicate that this is going to be your future. So you keep that visual in mind. The no jargon, vivid being the vivid verbal picture, repeatable. One of the things that comes innumerable times into chapter 4 and then throughout the book is to repeat things. You may have a vision, you may say it once, it may not necessarily sink in to people. You have to constantly repeat. You have to make sure you're saying it in every way, shape, or form possible. Whatever method of communication you can use them. And do it often. Repeat endlessly. The invitational, that's really about not just telling people. You want to listen. You want to have that two-way communication. You don't want to just dictate things. You want to hear how this change is going to impact people, how they can help you with the change, because every level in an organization has valuable people who, if you're dictating change that's going to impact your frontline folks, you want them to be bought in right from the beginning, because if they're not bought in, if they don't see your vision, if you're not clear and you don't constantly communicate and you don't ask for their input, inevitably there's going to be something that doesn't work out. Either things will be murky, you're waiting for them to buy in, but they don't understand. So the invitational point is to make things formal, informal, all kinds of different types of communication and making it two-way. And then walking the talk. We've probably all have been with people over the years in business who like to tell you what to do, but they don't exhibit that behavior. They don't commit to it themselves. And without that, it's very difficult to follow a leader who is not committed to their own vision. One of the things that I found pretty powerful is that nothing is more powerful than a leader backing up their own words. You know, when you've got somebody who talks the talk, walks the walk, it inspires commitment, motivates the employees. It's just a great way to move to that next step and to achieve that vision. then after this, so this is really kind of an interesting slide. That one of the points in the fourth step that says don't get lost in the clutter. So Cutter made made a note about how much information we're given in a 3-month period. So in his research, he said that visions and change is under-communicated by a factor of 10, which that surprised me. I thought there were a lot of organizations I've been involved with over the years, and I thought they did a pretty good job. But his research shows that within a typical 3-month period, we are exposed to 2.3 million words and numbers. So that's the communication that comes to us over a typical, work-wise, over a typical 3-month period. And typically when we are, we're pursuing a change vision, there are only 13,400 words and numbers. So that slide illustrates the percentage of change your employees are hearing about versus all the other communication they're getting. If it's that tiny and you're under-communicating that much, they're never going to buy in. They're never going to understand it. They're never going to commit to it. So I thought that was a really good point. And then the next slide is, so in the clarity part of your vision or just your statement, whatever you might be doing, this attaches to the clarity. So our goal is to reduce our mean time to repair parameters so they're perceptibly lower than all major competitors inside the United States and out. In a similar vein, we've targeted new product development, cycle times, order process times, and other customer relevant processes for change. So, okay, great. Snore. So then they came up with this. Go ahead. We're going to become faster than anyone in our industry at satisfying customer needs. Which one is going to get a better buy-in? You know, it's kind of pretty clear. So I think the clarity of vision was one of the big points that he made. And then just to close, under-communicating, even by a little, can easily kill a strategy. I was involved with a nonprofit a while back that I was helping them create a new strategy. I was brought on board after the CEO and the board had very clear direction for this new change strategy, and it was dramatically different. And when they went through all of the communicating steps until they brought someone on board to actually facilitate this change. And then all communication, up and down, stopped. They thought that they had done enough, that this new strategy had taken hold. It was going to work. They didn't give any thought to what would happen after this new person came in, was trying to direct this new strategy, but no one was talking about it except the new person. So they were totally stymied, and while they were limited success for a period of time, after a year or 18 months, the success died because the strategy, nobody talked about it anymore. That person was the only one having that conversation, and with one person trying to drive change, we'll hear in one of the next chapters about how that works out, and we all know that's not going to be too successful. So that's it for chapter 4.
So we have urgency to make change.
Hold it close.
So we have, can you test us? We have urgency to make change. We have a guiding coalition to work on that urgency. We've developed a vision, and now we've communicated that vision to our people. So the next step is to empower our people to make that change. So I'm going to start with the video here from Smarter, Faster, Better, and then work into this chapter here.
One process to the next through intelligent automation and the efforts of our team members. If an abnormality occurs and a defective part is about to move to the next process, the line is stopped. We have various devices in our processes and machines to implement Jidoka. One such idea is our pairing of a rope call switch and andon, an electric signboard. If team members judge there to be any abnormality, they can use the rope switch and andon to indicate a problem has been detected. Here, a team member finds a problem and pulls the call switch beside the production line. A chime sounds, and the number 26 on the andon lights up in yellow to inform the team leader that there's a problem at number 26 workstation. The team leader proceeds immediately to the site to investigate the situation and provide assistance. If the problem is solved within the prescribed section of the line, the team leader pulls the rope again. This turns the yellow light on the andon off, letting all production workers know that the line is returned to normal. If the abnormality cannot be corrected within the prescribed section of the line, it automatically stops. The andon light then changes to red. In this way, the colors of andon's lights let everyone know the condition of the production line at a glance. Poka-yoke, or fail-safe devices, also prevent the manufacture of poor quality products. The line is designed with machines.
So you can see there that that auto
process.
They had the andon lights, which, if you were working on that line, and you were a worker directly on that line, and you saw an issue, you could say, "Hey, here's a caution," and then your team leader would come over and work with you to see if you could fix that caution without shutting down the line. But if there was a major problem, you had to shut down the line, then you would go to red, and you would solve the problem of that line. And when it was solved, it would go back to green. So to set up this story here, this goes into 1984, when General Motors had an auto plant that had been closed for a few years. I believe it was Fairmont, California, and it had made cars. And their theory at GM was the line would never stop. That cars would go through, things would fail, and if there was a failure on a particular car, it would get dumped off on the end of the line and be put aside. GM felt that at that time that it would cost $15,000 a minute. This is 1984 when you stopped the line. So that plant closed. It failed because they didn't have quality cars that people weren't buying. So they set up a coalition with Toyota at that time, and they hired back about a dozen workers that went to Japan to view what was going on the Toyota plants. And one of the workers says, "Well, the plant's the same as ours. It's a little bit cleaner." But then they saw the andon system with the yellow, green, and red caution lighting system. And they learned about a lot of different things that happened in the plants in Japan. So they came back to the United States, and in partnership with GM and Toyota, they reopened the plant in Fairmont, California. Prior to that, prior to the reopening, a typical day in the plant for a line worker was to punch in at your time, go to the line, do some stuff, maybe go out for lunch and have a few beers or a few pops, and then go back into the line. And they even said at that time that there were hookers and prostitutes in the parking lot to keep everybody happy. So again, the plant closed, and now they reopened. So when they reopened, this management team and working team that went to Japan came back and helped set the line up again. So at this point, I'm going to kind of read you what happened a month later when the president of Toyota came to visit the plant.
Hold the mic very close, Steve.
A month after the plant reopened, Tester Toyoda, Numi's president, whose grandfather had founded Toyota in 1933, walked the Fremont floor. He saw an employee struggling to install a taillight that was wedged into a car frame at an odd angle. Toyota approached the worker and, reading the name stitched on his uniform, said, "Joe, please pull the cord." "I can fix this, sir," Joe said. "Joe, please pull the cord." Joe had never pulled an andon cord. No one in his area had since the plant had opened. There had been only a few cord pulls, and one of those had been an accident. "Sir, I can fix this," Joe said, working furiously to pop the taillight into place. Joe's team leader was standing nearby. That man's manager had been shadowing Toyota as he walked through the factory, so he was orbiting nearby as well. When Joe glanced up, he saw a half a dozen of the plant's most senior executives staring back. "Joe, please," Toyota said. Then he stepped over, took Joe's hand in his own, and guided it to the andon cord, and together they pulled a flashing light. A flashing light began spinning. When the chassis reached the end of Joe's station, and without the tail light correctly in place, the line stopped moving. Joe was shaking so much he had to hold his crowbar in both hands. He finally got the tail light positioned, and with a terrified glance at his bosses, reached up and pulled the andon cord, restarting the line. Toyota faced Joe and bowed. He began speaking in Japanese. "Joe, please forgive me," a lieutenant translated. "I have done a poor job of instructing your managers of the importance of helping you pull the cord when there is a problem. You are the most important part of the plant. Only you can make every car great. I promise I will do everything in my power. You never fail again." So I'm going to throw this out to the group and ask, does anybody have any, or some of you have examples of when you've allowed your team members to pull the andon cord in your business? Somebody has to have something where go ahead.
At Excel Dryer, certainly that's the case in our production line as well, that everybody on the line is empowered to essentially pull the cord. We don't have the right visual of the andon system, but in principle it works the same way, where everybody on the line is empowered to make that call and pull something off the line if it's not working properly.
Okay. And it's not, and this doesn't apply to a manufacturing business. I mean, in service businesses or other businesses, do people have the power to say, "Time out, this isn't right, we need to fix it"? We must have some more examples out there. Go ahead.
I just recently offered a lease to someone, and then to rent an apartment, and when I realized that they weren't going to work out, I decided to pay them off just to go away. So I canceled the lease, we shredded it, they signed something saying there was null and void, and then it was worth cash just to get rid of them. And I'm so grateful, because it would have been a nightmare, I think.
Okay. Any others? Go ahead.
Two things. Part of our business is the consulting side for restaurants. And when we set up restaurants to operate, we're there on site during the initial phases. And as food's coming out of the kitchen one night, I can see it's not right. And I tell the expediter, "Stop that tray. It's going in the dining room." You run and stop the tray. For one dish, there might be 8 on the tray. Bring them all back. We make all 8. So by the time you make one, 7 are cold. You always have time to redo it because the customer only sees it once. And secondly, for our coffee company, for our production line, this one person who does our packaging took a look at our labels one day and said, "They're not lined up." And it made 1/16 of an inch may not seem like much, but when you have 10 facings on a shelf, it's a lot of room, and it looks funny. So she's allowed to come to me and say, "Got to redo all the labels."
Very good. Any other ones?
Our business is a little different than that. Basically the same. It's like we have the rough carpentry and the finished carpentry, okay? Our policy, it's always the same. You can't let it go. You can't let the rough carpentry be not finished and finish it up on the finished carpentry. So what we do, if it takes an extra day, we stop, fix it, and go on. basically the same thing. That's where we get results.
Okay. Anybody else? Ed? I can give you a couple in our business. We do a lot of large landscape installations where we have plant material that are delivered directly to job sites from nurseries on 45-foot trailers. And we have a plant schedule that we're supposed to provide to the customer. And our crew leaders are always trained that if something is in question, whether it's not healthy or whatnot, that you have to reject it and return it. And or if plant material is undersized, you have to reject it and return it. Well, the nurseries don't like it. But at the end of the day, if we put the stuff in the ground and then we get called on it later on, we have to replace it and have the labor all over again. So the cost is incredible. And another final example in our side, and just happened recently this spring in our grounds maintenance division, that as everybody knows, we had a wet, rainy spring, and trying to do a 5-day schedule with 3 days of good weather is nearly impossible sometimes. But we had one of our account managers visiting following her crew that was doing accounts, and she did not like the final complete product. And when they got back at the end of the day, she told them, tomorrow you're going back and you're going to do all those accounts again. And you know, at the end of the day, it cost the company a considerable amount of labor cost, but I believe we did the right thing to make the right thing happen. So how do you empower people to take broad-based action? So in chapter 7 of the book, some of the comments that were made is, if I hear the word empowerment one more time, I think I will gag. So I think we've all seen this in our business. So you've told your vision to your team, believe that you understand your vision, and want to make change. So why does positive change not happen? According to Cotter, bosses discourage change to implement change. And not the boss at the top that's making the change or somebody else. It's usually somebody, a coworker or whatnot, is disrupting it, saying, this can't happen, this is ridiculous, so they squash the change. Another one is personal information systems make it difficult to act. A big one is staff has the lack of skills needed to make the change. So we make this broad statements, we're going to do this and do that, but does the team really have the skills to do what you're asking them to do? And then the other one, the final one, is formal structures make it difficult to act. Do you have a system in place that will allow this change to happen going forward? Another comment was attitude. Attitude training is as important as skill training. And dealing with the Franks of the world. In other words, change the people or change the people. You've all heard that one. And empowering effective change is communicate a sensible and achievable vision for change, which we heard earlier. Provide training for the change you want to occur. Should have this memorized. And align HR with proposed change. So HR needs to know what's happening. The people in your organization, when this change is happening, need to be measured on making sure that that's happening, and that's part of their performance evaluation, is what's happening with this change. And finally, confront the Franks of the world. That's all I have.
Great.
So I'm going to take a different approach. When you said Franks, I thought you were going to talk about Barney Frank. So the section that I want to talk about is decision making. And in the book that we all like the best, right? Yeah, Smarter, Faster, Better. There's a case study about Annie Frank, who was the first woman world champion in poker.
Annie Duke.
I mean, Annie Duke, what did I say?
Annie Frank.
Yeah, Annie Frank.
Anne Frank, little popular for
Really strange, isn't it? So I'm not going to play poker right now, but I want to talk about in decision making, how do you make forecasts? So if you think about it in business, decision making is really a process of forecasting. And in life, in the book, he talks a lot about we're always forecasting, and we're always trying to make predictions about the future. So for example, we make decisions in life, like when you send your children to private school, you're making a bet that by going to private school, they're going to do better than if they go public school and have a better chance, right? So you're actually spending money to predict the future. Or another example is when we have a baby, we're forecasting that the joy of becoming a parent will outweigh the financial burden in late nights. So let's just do this card trick. So will you play along? Okay, so Rebecca, I don't want to influence your picking a card, but just go ahead and pick a card. Everybody see this? I'm going to have her pick a card, any card. No.
Oh, I thought you were basically just trying to
No, now it looks like I know what that card is. So go ahead and pick any card. All right, so I'm going to turn around and show it to as many people as possible.
Oh, okay.
Not to me, though. Everybody got it? Okay, so now, don't let me see it. I'm going to ask you to put the card on the top of the deck. No, you got to put the card on the top.
We didn't get to see it on the top?
Right on the top. Okay.
Okay.
Everybody see that? So I just put the card on the top of the deck. And now I'm going to take 4 cards. That's your card, right?
I believe so.
You want to look at it one more time?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, go ahead and take a look at
Yes,
it one
that
more
is
time.
my card.
Okay, go ahead and put it back on the top of the deck. And I'm going to put these 4 cards on the bottom of the deck. Okay. Now I want to find your card. Okay, so part of this decision-making process is she's starting to make decisions about what am I up to, right? And I've got to make decisions about can I predict the future of this bet and will it work? So let's start off by, is that your card? No. Okay, everybody see that? That's not her card, right? So I'm going to take that card. I'm going to put the next card on top. Is that your card? No. Okay, so I'm going to take the next card and I'm going to put the 4th card. That should be your card on top, right?
Should be.
Okay, is that your card? No. Okay, everybody see that? It's not her card. Right? And now I'll take the next card, put it on top. Is that your card? Is that her card? No? Okay. So I could do this all night long, but Ira was already telling me I don't have any more time. So I've got 4 cards here, right? And you've seen all 4. Just showed you.
No.
No, you didn't see them?
No, you showed me the other cards.
Did I not show her these 4 cards? I'm going to show you them again.
Okay.
Because I want to make sure that you can predict the future and make a decision, because I'm going to ask you to do something.
Okay.
Right? Does everybody see what I'm doing? Okay. So let's see if these are your cards. Is that your card? Is that her card? Okay, so I take the card. Is that your card? Is that her card? Is that her card? I take the card I showed you, and I put the next card on top. Is that your card? Is that her card? No? Put it there. Are any 2 of those your cards? Any 2 of those are cards? Okay, so I'm going to put those there. So 4 cards, right? And you've seen them, right?
Yes.
Twice. And you've all seen them. Anybody want to bet?
That what?
That your card is in my hand. Would you like to bet that your card is in my hand? Why? You've seen your cards twice.
I don't know you or what you're doing.
You're all in on this. Okay, so in case I pick the wrong subject,
Yeah, there you go.
would anybody like to bet me? I bet her card is in here, but you've seen that it isn't, right? Anybody want to bet? You want to bet?
What's in your other hand?
You want to bet?
There's something else.
Shan?
There you go.
Okay, let's try it. I'm going to make it
Something up
easier.
your
Is that her card?
sleeve. No.
Okay, so now I only have 3 cards here, right? 3 cards. Anybody want to bet me? I'm going to bet her card is in here. Anyone want to bet me that it's not?
I'll bet you a quarter.
A quarter. How much you want to bet?
Yeah, I'll put 2 bits into one.
2 bits? Right here, 50 cents. How about $1? All right, we'll make it easier. Is that your card? Okay, that's not a card. We're down to 2 cards. You can all play along. You've seen
Oh,
it,
really?
right?
Yeah.
Anybody want $1? Anybody want to bet
got
a
it.
buck?
Yeah.
A buck? You're betting me that it's not in here. I'm betting you that it's in here.
Okay.
Okay. I got everybody's betting a buck up here. Okay. One
You're
more
gonna be
card?
rich.
Not your card. Okay. Anybody want to raise the bet? $10?
How many cards you have in your hand now?
You want to
Somewhere.
$10? It's not in
Does it
here.
really have one, or does
Right?
it have 2?
What's your name? Stell.
Stop.
Stell.
Yeah.
Okay. Ready?
Okay.
Give me just blow on that
Yeah.
for her. Is that her card? Is that her card? Okay.
That's why I didn't bet.
What? They're your cards. So, 10. 8 is 18. I got a couple of bits. $50 to get home.
20 out of the
enough
night.
gas. All right. So what was the whole point of that? Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. That worked. I don't need it. So I'm going to show you the scene because this is the coolest thing. So Annie Duke was the first woman world champion, and this is in 2004. And the thing that Annie Duke loved about poker was she was really, growing up, had a lot of personal issues and psychological issues that ran about trying to predict the future. And you would think the last thing you want to do is be a poker player to predict the future, right? And so in business, if you think about it, in business, when you're releasing a new product, so Excel, right? When you guys have to come out with a new product, you've got some history from the old product, but you're making bets on whether the new product is going to be a better launch or not, right? Sure. Or competing against your competitors. And so poker is all about making small bets to find out what your competitors may or may not do. And that's the whole process in poker. The longer you play and the more bets you make, the more you learn about what your competitor might do. Will they bluff? Won't they bluff? Will they think you're going to bluff? And in business, that's basically what we're doing every day in business. I'll give you an example. In our business, I've got two businesses, but in our coaching business, I decided for 15 years I would do live events. Every event that I did was live coaching. And I decided last year that we were going to create an online portal and it would be all online coaching. And we'd never done it before. And I thought, well, we better launch a small version first. So at the end of last year, I pulled the team together and I said, we're going to launch just a small version. We'll put our toe in and we'll test it. And so they started to ramp up for that. And within 2 weeks, I came in and I said, no, we're going to launch the whole thing. And you've got 8 weeks to get it up and running. So just pulled the wool out from it. You should have seen their faces. They were like this. They were like, he's nuts. And 2 days later, I came in the office and my videographer, who had to create most of the website and one of the videos, said, you know what? I just thought about this for the last 40 hours, and this is so exciting. We're not doing the little bet. We're making the big bet. We went all in. So I went all in with the big bet, right? You're putting all your chips on the table and went all in. And we knocked it out of the park in February. Had I done the small bet, nobody would have been excited about it. And we wouldn't have the revenue that we had. So I want you to watch this scene. So in this scene, in 2004, Annie Duke is down to, it's her and an individual named Paul Helmuth. Now, anybody here watch Championship Poker? Who's Paul Helmuth? Phil Helmuth. Phil Helmuth. Who's Phil Helmuth? 14 championship bracelets. 14. He's the winningest poker player, right? Phil Helmuth. He's just unbelievable. And now Annie, by the way, has just beat her brother. The last three were Annie, her brother, and Phil. She beats her brother, and now she's going to go head-to-head with Phil Helmuth, who's the god among poker players. And this is the last hand. So for those of you who don't understand the way poker works is you get 2 cards down, Texas draw, each get 2 cards down, and then there's cards up. And the last card is called the river card. So one by one, the cards are placed up. You know what you have. The other person knows what they have. And you start making bets based on what you think the other person has, what they might have with what's going to come up, and the history that you've accumulated betting against this person, making these smaller bets to try and figure out what's going to happen. So let's go ahead and do this. I love it. Isn't this exciting?
And he's got Phil second-guessing every move he makes and every move he doesn't make. Phil Helmuth at about a 3-to-1 disadvantage on the chip count right now. Checking his pocket cards, 10-8, unsuited.
Look at all the money he's got, right?
Just a call of the big blind. Annie Duke. King 10.
And she will put no more into the
Okay,
pot.
so
and
none
then
of them have a
flop.
two-pair, right?
And each pair, they're 10. Annie with a better kicker, though, with the king.
There's a scenario. They share a card, and Annie's got the better of it with the better kicker. She checks.
Phil, ready to act? With high
They're
pair,
testing
you'll
each
bet
other right
45,000.
Annie Duke is going to raise Phil Hellmuth.
Well, we heard Phil talking about earlier how he was trying to trap Annie. Well, she's had the cards continue to try to sucker him out of more chips. And she's going to raise 200,000 as she has set her trap.
She said aggression would be a key in this tournament, and she is trying to prove that theory right now.
Phil liked this flop. He got top pair, but now he's been check raised.
Come on.
And with that top pair, Phil Hellmuth going all in with his 450,000 chips. Annie Duke put the pressure on Phil when she check raised him. And now with Phil's all-in call, the pressure is back on Annie.
About 450 more. She set the trap, but Phil has come back very strong.
Annie calls the all-in. And Phil sees what he's up against.
And Annie is overcome with emotion, seeing how close she is to winning this championship.
Annie has control of his hand. Now here comes the turn. It's a 7. No help for Phil.
Annie Duke is now one card away from $2 million.
He needs an 8.
An 8, please.
Phil Hellmuth needs an 8 to win this pot. Both players on their feet, anticipating the river card. It's a 3. Annie Duke has defeated 9 of the strongest poker players in the world and wins the first ever World Series of
Otherwise,
Poker
you're going to hear
tournament.
him swearing. For the next 10 minutes, just Phil, just using the F word all the time. So here's some of the things I want to read about. So poker is about using chips to gather information faster than anyone else. Think about in business how we all play poker, how we use investments, how you make investments to beat out your competition faster than anybody else. You're buying your way little by little to bigger, faster success. Think about making bets, investments as a way of asking other players questions. Are you willing to fold right now? Do you want to raise? How far can I push you before you start acting impulsively? There's also another thing in poker where everyone is looking around going, are you the idiot at the table looking for certainty? And I love that line because one of the things that he says in the book is intermediate players crave certainty. So how many of you in business crave certainty? Right? Okay? So intermediate poker players crave certainty. They want to know as many rules as possible in order to make decisions. So how many of you want to know, as much information, as much rules as possible before you're willing to make those decisions? Elite players use that craving that intermediate players have against them. It makes intermediate players more predictable, and you can see the patterns in their behavior, and that's what Annie did to Phil Hellmuth. You don't see the whole game. You have to watch, the whole, when they played this round, just the two of them, I think for a couple of hours. Testing all the time. So I really love that. And the last thing I'll just point out is, how do we learn to make better decisions? Is also talked about in this chapter. And in the book Leading Change, he talks about how do you incentivize your employees to make small decisions, better decisions that will lead to bigger outcomes. So anybody have an example in your business where you incentivize employees bit by bit by bit to get a bigger outcome? Just curious. I'll give you an example in our business on the financial planning side. About 8 to 9 years ago, I put in a cash quarterly bonus. And rather than, your bonus is this, and your bonus is that. By the way, when the lawyer was talking, it was like, I can't get sued for this. Everybody gets the bonus divided by the number of people. And it's based on productivity. And it's based on, productivity that happens that quarter. And there's different divisions in our business, but it all gets pooled together. So regardless of where the money is generated from, where the profits are, it all gets pulled together and divided by those number of people. And what I found out that happened was I started to unconsciously, they started to take a look at, wow, where was their time better spent to get that profitability up? What could they do away with? And where was my time better spent? And so they started taking away things that I was doing that weren't profitable, so everybody would be more profitable. So that was one of the results. So by training others to think probabilistically, I don't even know how to say that word, you force ourselves to envision various futures, to hold contradictory scenarios, and then expose ourselves to a wider spectrum of success and failures to develop our intuition about which forecasts are more or less likely to come true. And that's what happened. Unbeknownst to myself, I encourage my people to make those kind of forecasts, make those kind of predictions, and then start to take charge. And the last thing I'll leave you with is, out of that, what happened is, and I learned this from my coach, Dan Sullivan, the strategic coach, he always likes to say, in business, you're either in charge or you're in control. You can't be both. So how many of you are in charge of your business? Raise your hand. How many of you think you're in charge? And how many of you are in control? And many of you didn't raise your hand. Do it again. So who's in control of your business? Okay, and who's in charge? All right. If you're in control, that means you're controlling everything. It goes back to you're killing off creative decisions, you're killing off probability because you're the one in control. When you're in charge, you're leading the charge, the big vision, everything we've talked about, and you're basically going, this is the direction I want to take the company. Charge. Now, everybody else, you're in control. And in my business, I'm not in control. I'm not in control of anything, but I am in charge. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you. I will be collecting the money at the door.
So the section that I have is step 7 to leading change, which is consolidating gains and producing more change. And to kick that off, I was going to play a little movie trailer.
Summer in the city of Arendelle. It couldn't be warmer. It couldn't be sunnier. But that's about to change. Forever.
Arendelle. It's completely frozen. Cold, 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 cold. A real howler in July, yeah?
The land's covered in eternal snow.
Really?
If we don't do something soon, we'll all freeze to death.
You want to talk about a problem? I sell ice for a living.
Ooh, that's a rough business to be in right now. I mean, that is really, that's unfortunate.
My lady. Whoa, whoa.
This is awkward. Not you're awkward, but just because I'm awkward. You're gorgeous. Wait, what?
Hi, everyone. I'm Olaf. Hi. You're creepy.
Whoa! I don't want it.
Whoa.
No.
Sorry, we got off to a bad start.
I know how to stop this winter.
Yeah. Hang on.
I like fast.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Get your feet down. This is fresh lacquer. Seriously, were you raised in a barn? Let's go bring back summer! Man, am I out of shape. Wolves.
Stop!
Whoa. Whoa!
Are you okay?
I've got a thick skull. I don't have a skull.
Oh, woo!
Hairbrush.
So cute. It's like a little baby unicorn.
Now we just have to survive this blizzard!
That's no blizzard!
Sorry.
That's my sister!
That would have been nice to know. Heads up!
It is not nice to throw snow, people!
Whoa, 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 feisty pants. Just let the snowman be.
I'm calm.
Great. Oh, come on.
Olaf, you're melting.
Some people are worth melting for. You're just maybe not right this second.
So probably the one place that you thought you'd never have to sit through that movie or the trailer was at the Family Business Center. So for those of you with kids, grandkids, nieces, nephews, what have you, the movie Frozen, which ended up, as we all know, winning several Academy Awards in different categories. And so what's the tie-in with the books that we read and why we're looking at cartoons. It really comes down to the process that was behind creating that movie, and really the process that the folks who do all these animated movies go through to put together what they're trying to achieve. And so the change, and the tie-in to the book Leading Change, the change that they were trying to accomplish with this movie was to spin around the traditional, the prince comes in and saves the little girl at the end. They're trying to spin that around and make the point that the girl didn't need the prince, that the girl could do it, or the girls in this case could do it on their own. That was the change that they were trying to create. Believe it or not, the whole process takes the better part of 2 years to put together a production like this. And at several different points as they were making the movie, they essentially, the teams on both the production and the music side had thrown their hands up and said, we're at an impasse. We can't pull this thing together. We can't make it work. But in spite of that, the teams constantly got together. They constantly met and collaborated and worked to get through what they called creative tension. Anybody have creative tension in their business? Usually that's called screaming at each other, right? So creative tension that they worked through to get to the final product, which was obviously a very successful movie and a lot of successful songs, one in particular. So as they went through and created that change, there's a few different things that I see as takeaways from the process that they went through. First of all, the process is messy. So if you think creating change is going to be smooth and easy in your organization, you're wrong. It's going to be a messy process. You need to get used to that. You need to work through the stress and the points where you think everything's broken. That's essentially the nature of the quote that Ira has his hand in front of at the moment, but that I've got up on the screen there is that you need to work through that stress. Another item that's a takeaway is don't develop devotion to what you've already done. That's a trap. So what you've already accomplished, even in the change process, don't feel that you've got to stick with that. You might change some things along the way. They did that several times with developing the movie, where they scrapped the entire beginning and rewrote it once they finally got on track with their idea. Major change takes time. You've got to be realistic. It doesn't happen overnight. If you're trying to change significant processes, this is not something that's going to occur in 3 months, 6 months. It could be several years before you get to where you want to be. A big takeaway for me from the Creating Change book was the whole concept of complacency. So your past success, the past success of your organization and your people is going to work against you creating this change for the future, because to the extent that you've been successful, then people feel comfortable. They don't feel a need to change. They're complacent. What's the downside if I don't do this? Are you going to fire me? Are you going to throw me out? Probably not. So I don't have any great impetus to get behind your vision for a change. That whole issue of complacency, I think, can really sneak up on you and is hidden probably throughout your organization. Just as a quick real-life example, in our company, we've been trying to work through a couple of change processes over the last few years, spent a pretty significant amount of money with some consultants, and we've seen limited success so far. And I would say that going through, as Tiffany mentioned earlier in the presentation, we really need to, according to the author of Leading Change, follow the 8-step process. I think we skipped like 7 of them. So it definitely is something you need to do in a disciplined manner. it's something that you need to really plan out. And again, understand it's going to be messy and it's going to take some time. I'll just leave you with a quick quote. We've all done some storytelling here tonight. So the consequences of a mistake with this step 7, consolidating gains and producing more change. The consequences of a mistake here can be extremely serious. After watching dozens of major change efforts in the past decade, the author says, I'm confident of one cardinal rule. Whenever you let up before the job is done, critical momentum can be lost and regression may follow. Until the changed practices attain a new equilibrium and have been driven into your culture, they can be fragile. So until you've accomplished this change, you may be kidding yourself that you've been successful until you've really driven it into the organization. And one way to do that is to consolidate the gains and show people the small wins to push forward.
Well, thank you all for hanging in there with us. I know this is a little bit of a lot to take in. These books were really wonderful for us to go through. It has shown some light on some changes that we've tried implementing. Oh, thank you. Within our own organizations, and shown us some pitfalls that we may have had.
Microphone.
The last chapter, can everybody hear me? No. It's just going to be easy. Can you hear me? No.
Use the mic. Hold it
I
close.
wasn't using it. I was not using it on purpose because my throat is killing me. But in the last chapter of Smarter, Faster, Better, we learned why all of the steps that we've led up to and being spoon-fed information to our employees, our staff, our managers. Being spoon-fed is not necessarily the way you want to finish out this product. You really want to have your people engaged. Being spoon-fed information does not always translate into better, faster, better, faster, and more efficient. In the past 2 decades, we have had so much information injected into our daily lives, as in Tiffany's, actually, I think it was your slide. It's been injected into our lives so rapidly. We're all human. We really can't take on that much information and really make it useful to us. We have smartphones, we have laptops, we have computers, we've got tablets that feed us the information just when we ask for it. Just because it's fed to us doesn't necessarily mean we're using it. Theoretically, we, with all of this information, should be the happiest, the wealthiest, the most knowledgeable, and the least stressed generation that's out there. And we all know that that's not true. Think about it. With the apps that we have readily available to us, they track our spending, they track our savings, they track what we eat, they track basically every movement of our lives, but unfortunately, we are human. We're not able to really absorb all of that information and make the best use of it. Within this book, one of the case studies that they did was on a school in Cincinnati. It's the Avondale Public School. In 2002, they had an epidemic on their hands. Less than 36% of their children were passing the standardized tests. This came as a result of years of failing economy, record unemployment. In the 1980s, the school was surrounded by drug dealers just taking over the district. And it created a culture where these children just didn't have a good place to start out their school years. They were just not doing well. However, one thing that Cincinnati had was an unlimited amount of resources, it seemed. The state of Ohio dumped millions of dollars into the school district trying to create change. They gave them all kinds of computer software, all kinds of information. They were tracking these children. They were tracking what was going on in the classrooms. And 6 years into this project of tracking these changes and implementing all of this, they went back to the teachers and said, well, why are these children not doing better? And the teachers came back and said, we're really not looking at the information. We're getting so much of it. We're getting flooded with so much information about these children. We don't know where to make change to make their lives better. So they had implemented at that point in time a program that was the elementary initiative. What they did with all of this information is they made the teachers keep track. They had little note cards on the children. They had to go to a data room every day, and they had to translate that data from the classroom onto whiteboards, onto sheets of paper on the wall, and then they had to create graphs themselves. So they're no longer being just fed information. They still had all the resources that money could buy, but they weren't being fed it. They had to be engaged. They had to be involved with it. They were creating the data themselves. They could then see how creating smaller reading groups for the children, going to changing the children's classrooms and having different teachers for different portions of the day allowed the children to learn better. At the end of the program, at the beginning of the program, like I said, they had 36% of the kids were passing. By the end of the program, they had quadrupled the number of children passing the standardized tests. They had 84% of the kids pass the math curriculum alone. I mean, that was just something that was just critical to that organization. And by having the teachers manually create this information, even though they had the data before, they didn't know what to do with the data. They needed to be manipulating the data themselves to understand what they needed to do in the classrooms. So the change was already there. The teachers didn't know what to do with it. The parents were getting all this information, but were wondering why their kids still weren't passing. But in the end, the teachers really were able to get around what it is that was holding the kids back. They were able to get around finding out what was holding them back, what teachers taught better in different subjects. So the moral of the story is we can go through all of these steps, 1 through 7. When you get to 8, when the change is already implemented within your organization, you really have to have your staff engaged. I think we've all been there. We've all been really excited about change and wanting to get everything done. We've given our employees new computers, new software, new technology, and then we sat back and said, okay, now we're going to be making more money. And then we realize, after we've done this, that we have a staff that's still working the old way because they haven't embraced it themselves. They haven't engaged themselves in it. One of the things that I found really interesting in this chapter, in 2014, UCLA examined how students took notes in class. They compared students who hand wrote their notes versus students who typed the notes during class. And what they found is the people who were handwriting their notes, as I'm watching around the room, really embraced the information that they were taking in versus passively typing the notes. When you're passively typing the notes, your mind almost can shut off because a lot of these, especially the younger generation, can type really fast, but they're not absorbing any of that information. They think they are, but they really aren't. When they came back with the test results, they found that students that hand wrote their notes did twice as well on their tests than those who took notes on laptops. And actually, our instructor during this program had let us know that based on that information, he no longer let his students bring laptops to class. They all had to bring notebooks to make them absorb that information better. So the moral of the story is, we all want our businesses to do better. We all want to be more efficient. We all want to make our sales go up, make our manufacturing lines go faster. And we all want to give our employees what they need to do this, but you have to get them engaged and you have to get them involved in absorbing that information that you're giving them to make it really more effective for them. And I think that is the end of our program.
Yep. I know we're running a little bit over. This was an experiment where we put a lot of work in. This was a few meetings that they all got a lot out of this. I hope they communicated the books to you. I have one more presentation that, as I said, was not phoned in from Slovenia, but sent to us from Slovenia. So I'm just going to read what Mark Zacchio of Olive Street Development in Greenfield wrote along with this silent movie. I want to sincerely thank you for putting together our book club, reading and digesting Smarter, Better, Faster, and Leading Change. Both have had a significant impact on my life. I made the time-lapse film of myself cleaning the office to demonstrate that even a really tough task can be broken down into small pieces and that in a short period of time can make a real difference in your life. After multiple overlapping development projects, my office has gotten really bad, even embarrassing. So I committed to showing up no matter what for an hour a day. Some days I honestly didn't get much done, but like most things in life, having the self-motivation to show up often builds on itself. The state of disarray in my office was significantly hampering my production, and the definition of production in Smarter, Better, Faster reminded me that our level of productivity in life is directly correlated to the many daily decisions and choices that we make. My messy office was a choice, and all I needed to do to change was to show up and make a different one. I highly recommend both of these books, and I'm sorry I couldn't be there for the presentation. Mark Zacchio from Slovenia. So I just want to thank everybody here, and this was, I don't know if we're going to do this again, but I just want to say this was such an enthusiastic response by all of them that they have already signed up to do it again next year. So, thank you so much. Except Charlie, you look surprised. So thank you so much. Really appreciate you being here. We're not going to be meeting again except for our roundtables until September. And again, if you'd like to sit in on a roundtable, let me know. Thank you so much.